The floor is yours.
And thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today in what I think it was Ciarán described as a special sitting reflective of the gravity of the situation that RTE finds itself in right now. And that's why we're here. We're here to work as best we can in partnership with you in restoring trust in RTE, in ensuring the future of our public service broadcaster. And yes, it has been pointed out, and you're right, we have a role to play as legislators in ensuring that the method of collection of our licence fee is reflective of how people consume media in the 21st century, is reflective of the very valuable service that you provide. And that's our role, and that's our function, and that's one, certainly my Fine Gael colleagues and I, we made a very lengthy submission to the Future Media Commission suggesting exactly that there should be deep reform of the licence fee collection mechanism. And that ultimately was presented by the Commission to Government as a proposal. It didn't get through government scrutiny, and I'm enthused by the recent recommitment by our Taoiseach to again look at this and to legislate for an alternative method of collection and to have that method of collection in place by 2025. But it's absolutely crucial that if we are to go to the Irish public with renewed determination to support the future of RTE, that we have their support as legislators and we have their trust. And that's where we're falling down. That's where RTE is falling down in restoring that public trust. And despite numerous opportunities presenting to the former board, and I would argue to an extent the current board, we're still not there. And I want to particularly commend you, Kevin Backhurst, on all of your public outings in the last 8 weeks. I would argue you've done your utmost in trying to restore that public trust. You've been open, transparent, you appear exceptionally committed to the future of RTE, and I would hope you would get the support of the board and indeed your executive team colleagues in doing exactly that. But let's just dwell for a moment on where we're at. I pointed out in the most recent committee meetings where the board appeared before us that there's a massive failure in the reporting mechanisms, the reporting structure that's in place within RTE right now, so that the debacle that we've just witnessed, to ensure that it can never happen again. And I would like to be able to say to the Irish public right now, I'm confident now that those reporting structures have changed, that we don't have a situation where the former director, or the former chair, should I say, Moya Doherty, said it was staggering that neither she nor her board colleagues were even aware of the existence of a barter account. And can I just, on that context of ensuring that you are putting in place or have already put in place better reporting mechanisms, can I just ask Ms. Nirali, because you said yourself before this committee on June the 28th, in relation to the understatement of Ryan Tubridy's earnings from 2017 to 2019, you said, was this figure understated and by whom is a question that we as a board are also very anxious to know the answer to. That Grant Thornton in-depth review is now complete, and one would hope as a result of that we're at least a bit further on in our confidence that the board now has those necessary reporting mechanisms in place. So at the end of that process, do we now know the answers to that very simple question? Because it's just one of many questions that has seriously dented public confidence in RTE, in its board, and its structures and its culture. Do we know the answer? Why was that figure underreported and by whom?
Well, I think we can surmise in relation to, as was pointed out in the report itself, that it appeared to be a mechanism to report the earnings under $500,000. As to who did that, the report factually points out that it straddled two chief financial officers, the previous chief financial officer and the financial officer that started after he was there while she was still there in a handover period. And also that handover period seems to have, there's a dispute, so to speak, as to who was responsible for what. So that's all there in the report. And it's one person's story versus another person's story. But you know, we can't make assumptions about unless somebody is going to say, well, actually, I should have taken ownership of that. And that's what I hoped would have happened with the Grant Thornton report, that executives would have said, would have owned their mistakes and said, you know what, hands up, that was me. But that didn't happen.
And therein lies the problem, I would argue, and therein lies the crux of the ambition you should be employing right now in trying to restore the Irish public's trust in your board's oversight of how RTE operates. That's critically important. And even this morning, Kevin, and I know it's kind of, you might argue it's something inconsequential, but the optics of it are horrific. That yesterday an ad was placed to hire a photographer, pay them €80,000 a year to sit on the set of Fair City and take a few photographs every day. And when you were asked about this earlier on, you weren't even aware of it. You weren't aware who had made that decision. You weren't aware why the figure of 80,000 or €240,000 over 3 years had been applied. And again, in an organisation that spends millions every year, that might seem inconsequential, but in terms of the optics of that to the general public, of not knowing the detail of that, who made that decision, it's just horrific. And
Deputy, can I just clarify a little bit on that? I was aware of it this morning, and I immediately asked for the details of it.
But you hadn't been made aware before the ad was placed?
No, I'm not aware of every single hiring decision in the organisation. I was surprised to see that, particularly if they're contracts rather than permanent staff. They didn't. But I will get to the bottom of it and I will report back on it. Can I just, sorry, if I could just come to the question you asked about the reporting of Ryan's salary in 2017-19. The one thing I would say on that, and you know, as Ciarán rightly says, Grant Thornton in the end had to surmise what they thought had happened because there were conflicting reports. All I can say is the procedures we have put in place in the organisation now will ensure that that could never happen again now. These decisions on top presenter salary now come to the full leadership team for discussion, which was not the case in the past. Any top presenter salary which is then approved by the interim leadership team then has to go to the board committee to be approved as well. There's a really clear, transparent process there and sign-off, which will ensure that won't happen. We've already committed to publishing every single year in real time the salaries of the top 10 presenters, and those will be fully audited by our auditors so that they can be relied on as part of the annual report. So, you know, together we've taken the measures. Even if we can't get to the exact detail of which individual took that decision, we are confident that that cannot happen again because we put in place the procedures to address it.
That's very helpful to hear, and thank you.
And just to add to that, in terms of the line between the leadership team and the board, those procedures are so tightened up now, and also we will receive the minutes of all of the leadership group meetings, so we have oversight of that. Okay. So we've put a lot of things in place, and we're changing a lot of the terms of reference for the subcommittees as well to make sure everything's clear. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. One final question, and my colleague Senator Carrigy alluded to this earlier on. You were probably sitting on one of the most valuable land banks in the country. There's no question about it, if not the most valuable land bank in the country. And in an organisation where you're in a pretty precarious financial footing, and it's a judgment call as to how precarious that is, I think you need to seriously consider the future of that land bank and how the value of that land bank has a role to play in the survival of RTE. Conservatively, I would argue, and I'm no expert in real estate, but it's worth somewhere in the region. If you look at the previous sale back in 2017, it's probably worth somewhere in the region of €500 million at this point. And I'm asking this question, not in jest, I'm deadly serious in asking this question. Has it ever been considered why RTE actually has to be in Dublin, to locate itself in Dublin? Yeah. We in this country have a long-standing problem that all of Irish public life is very much focused on this place we're now sitting in on the eastern side of the island. I'm thinking for the moment of, there are numerous other locations that RTE could place itself in. Right now, in Galway City, we have an airport sitting there, owned by the taxpayer. It's 115 acres. It could actually fit 4 RTEs on site. It's in a city that has a long-standing tradition in drama, in film, in music production. Galway City itself actually is one of only 5 cities in the world designated as a UNESCO City of Film. So there's an extraordinary tradition there of production. There are 50 production companies, they have 600 staff. TG Ceathair does extraordinary work there. In fact, that site could be a possibility to co-locate TG Ceathair and RTE all on the one site. All of the synergies, all of the economies of scale one could achieve through that. And it's also, I'm nearly certain, in the Gaeltacht. So would RTE contemplate moving lock, stock and barrel out of Dublin City? The symbolism of that in terms of the Irish people as a whole would be very powerful, I would argue, and you get to sell that site. I just think it's something you should seriously consider. And I'm just wondering, has that ever been considered, or has such a discussion ever taken place at board level? Thanks.
Well, I could talk a little bit now, Deputy, that's all right. I would say that the location of everything is under consideration in terms of the strategy, but one of the things we are focusing on is about moving more staff and production out of Dublin. And we're totally focused on what value we can get from the site. And I hope you're right. If it's worth £500 million, that would be great news, but I rather suspect it's not. But we are getting professional valuation done of it. We're trying to leverage everything we can. At the same time, we're also, as a leadership team, trying to address the exact question you just raised about, we do make a lot of content around Ireland. In fact, most of our high-quality dramas in the last year were not made in Dublin, although one, obviously, Kin was, but many of them were not. But we're ambitious to do more of that, and that's very much part of the plan that we hope to unveil in October as to where we can look. And as for Galway, I think you'll find the Chair is quite supportive of your suggestion.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deputy Cannon.